despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer.
So the dog decided to send him to secondary.
Correct.
How does the dog determine immigration status?
Police officers often make questionable decisions in the field, forgetting that the law is the same for everyone and that they can be held accountable in court too. Today we'll be going through these cases where corrupt cops were instantly attacked in courtrooms, starting with this Border Patrol agent who thought he could get away with anything he did on the job, until one guy got tired of his behavior and filed a case against him. Watch how the attorney takes him to the cleaners but slowly builds up his case.
When you're at the Border Patrol checkpoint, your duties are to enforce immigration laws and look for terrorists and look for weapons of mass destruction and assist in detecting narcotics. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you do this, of course, you're following a procedure manual that tells you what to do?
Following policy, sir.
Written policy?
Yes, sir.
You have a copy of the written policy?
No, I do not, sir.
Have you ever seen a copy of that written policy?
That states our authority to conduct immigration checks, or for the checkpoint itself, sir?
For that checkpoint.
No, I have not, sir.
Are you aware of any written guidelines or policies or procedures on how to run that checkpoint?
I am aware that they're out there, sir.
You're aware that they're out there?
The agent had illegally detained a U.S. citizen at the border checkpoint without any legal cause. The attorney didn't take long to ask him crucial questions about his job, and the officer started to have serious trouble with the question.
You get this straight. You're testifying right now that you are aware that there are written guidelines and procedures for this checkpoint?
Can you state that question again, sir?
Is it your testimony here and now that there are written guidelines and procedures for this checkpoint?
To my knowledge, yes, sir.
Have you seen them?
No, I have not, sir.
But to your knowledge, they exist.
Yes, sir.
The officer's story fell apart when the attorney exposed his hypocrisy in front of the entire courtroom. He was about to play a call recording where, shockingly, the officer made a completely different claim.
Do you recall on June 1st of this year giving a telephonic statement to Mr. Victor?
I do not recall the exact date, but yes, I do recall a telephonic interview, sir.
Do you recall you were in a room with Mr. Katz?
Yes, sir.
I believe there was another attorney in the room who was a representative of the Border Patrol Union?
Yes, sir.
And you were on the telephone to Mr. Victor?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that that tape recording was being recorded?
Yes, sir.
And were you trying to tell the truth at that time?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember being asked during that statement if you were aware of any written guidelines, policies, and procedures for this checkpoint?
Do I remember that specific question, sir?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Do you remember saying that you were not aware of any written guidelines, policies, or procedures?
No, sir.
Would it help to refresh your memory if you heard a tape playing of your voice?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, if I may.
If you want to use that one, it's fine.
It starts right at the beginning of that.
This one needs to.
However, just as the attorney was about to play the recording that would have exposed the officer, the state's attorney started questioning whether it should be allowed.
This is your voice, and if you remember being asked this question and given this answer.
And Your Honor, the state's going to object at this point. Was this noticed as part of your trial exhibit and disclosure?
Actually, Judge, this doesn't need to be noticed because it's impeachment, which is exactly how we're using it right now.
Your Honor, the same standard would apply to both parties. The state would expect that everything that be given in notice to both parties.
Judge, the law's well settled in Arizona. If the defense had to give impeachment to the state of the state's witnesses before the state's witnesses testified, it wouldn't be much of impeachment, would it? We're simply disclosing the audio tape of the interview that the state's witness, where the state's counsel was present throughout the entire interview.
Your Honor,
I have no understanding what possibly could be the objection to this.
Your Honor, may I have a moment? Your Honor, Mr. Victor's quite correct under Rule 613B. The state withdraws its objection.
Once again, the state's attorney's objection was withdrawn quickly, asserting that the defense was within its rights to play the audio.
How the operation of that particular checkpoint is to be conducted?
No, to my knowledge, no. Is there a citizenship there? If somebody's traveling through there, say, some sort of checkpoint, they're U.S. citizens, they're free to go. If they're not U.S. citizens, they say they are not.
Agent Gomez, did you recognize that as your voice?
Yes, sir.
Were you asked the question if there were any policies, procedures, or written policies, procedures, or guidelines for that checkpoint?
Yes, sir.
Was your answer that you were not aware of any?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The Border Patrol agent was caught lying in court, and his expression said it all. He knew he was in big trouble, and this was just the start, as the attorney was ready to dig even deeper.
Have your testimony correct that when people pull up and you ask them if you're a U.S. citizen and whether they answer yes or no, then they're on their way?
Yes, sir.
So if someone pulls up and you say, are you a U.S. citizen, and they say no, they're on their way?
No, sir.
Well, which is it? You just said if they say yes or no, they're on their way. But then I asked the question a different way. If they said no and you said they're not on their way, which one is it?
Usually if somebody says no, they already have their immigration documents with them. They present that to me, and they're on their way.
You've got to admire how the attorney crafted his questions, making it tough for the corrupt Border Patrol agent. The clueless officer couldn't even stick to his story and was instantly outmatched.
I originally asked if you are unable to determine citizenship at the primary checkpoint, that you usually try to get them to secondary.
Yes, sir.
I did not say always try to get them to secondary. Do you understand my question?
Yes, sir.
Usually means sometimes not, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
So is it fair to say that sometimes, if you are unable to determine citizenship at the primary checkpoint, that you let them go anyway?
No, sir.
I don't understand again. If someone comes up and you cannot determine citizenship, you say you usually try to get them to secondary. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Usually means not always. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Like, I usually wear a suit to court, but not always. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So there are some times that people come up and you are unable to determine citizenship, but you just let them go on their way. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Then what do you do with them?
I try to establish the citizenship there,
And suppose you can't.
and they go to secondary, sir.
So if you are unable to determine citizenship, they always go to secondary.
Yes, sir.
Not usually, but always now.
Yes, sir.
By now, the officer had been proven wrong twice in court. Finally, the attorney shifted focus to his client, and that is when he completely tore the officer apart, exposing his true nature for everyone to see.
Mr. Anderson was sent to secondary inspection because of the dog alert. Is that correct?
It was a combination of both immigration and the canine alert, sir.
Okay. So you're saying part of the reason he was sent to secondary was immigration, not the
Yes.
dog alert?
Yes, sir.
But wasn't the decision made to send him to secondary, wasn't that decision made before he ever got to you?
Yes, sir.
And the decision was made, or you got the signal from Agent Spoonamore,
Correct.
before any immigration question was asked?
Correct.
And Agent Spoonamore gave you that signal because his dog alerted.
Correct.
So the dog decided to send him to secondary.
Correct.
How does the dog determine immigration status?
The canine does not determine citizenship, sir.
So he wasn't sent to secondary for immigration. He was sent to secondary because the dog alerted.
Mr. Anderson never answered my immigration question.
But the decision that he was going to secondary had already been made, correct?
Correct.
He could have pulled up to that primary checkpoint with a passport in his hand, and he was still going to secondary. Is that correct?
Correct.
The attorney brilliantly exposed the Border Patrol agent and his deep-seated disdain for citizens. Shortly after, he made another powerful point, leaving the agent utterly speechless.
Is there any better documentation of U.S. citizenship than a U.S. passport?
No, sir.
So it didn't matter what he said, he was going to secondary
Yes, sir.
because the dog said so.
Because the canine alerted to the vehicle, sir.
Is a canine trained to alert to people here illegally?
No, sir.
So the dog wasn't alerting for immigration.
In the end, the lawyer proved the stop was illegal and the Border Patrol agent could do nothing but accept his mistake and pay a hefty fine. This officer was owned pretty badly, but this next cop was given the ultimate sentence for the hideous crime he committed.
The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months.
Derek Chauvin was caught and charged for the tragic death of George Floyd on May 25, 2020, an event that sparked worldwide protests and the famous BLM movement. Deserved a thorough and detailed court process, which, well, went through until the judge reached his sentence.
I wanted to thank everybody for being here and for providing the input you did. Not just the people who were in the courtroom here, but also those who provided written statements, both from the Floyd family and the defendant's family. I've read all the impact statements that were submitted earlier and listened carefully to all the input here today, and it is truly appreciated that you took the time to stay with this case and to provide me with input. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation and carefully considered all the facts of the case and the law. But my comments are actually going to be very brief. Most of it's going to be in writing. I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case. And that is why, as opposed to trying to being profound here on the record, I prefer that you read the legal analysis that explains how I determined the sentence in this case.
Despite the immense pressure mounted on the jury, the judge made sure to tell everyone that the sentence was not based on emotions and law was followed throughout the proceeding.
What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Floyd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community. It has been painful throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family. I'm not going to attempt to be profound or clever, because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases.
Finally, after giving a short speech, the judge announced the sentence for the former Minneapolis police officer.
Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota statute section 60904, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis.
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything from the defense? No, Your Honor. All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison and was later sent to the Oaks Park Heights prison. However, this isn't the last time a cop was sentenced in court, as this time the judge decided to unload on the officer.
Despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer.
Former Idaho police officer Daniel Howard was arrested in 2023 for connections to the murder of his wife that occurred in 2021. The officer pled not guilty, and as the case proceeded to trial, it did not take long for the jury to reach a verdict.
Is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of domestic battery? Guilty. Count 2. Is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of murder in the first degree? Not guilty. Is the defendant Daniel Howard guilty or not guilty of second-degree murder? Guilty.
Counsel, I'm proposing a sentencing date of May 23rd at 1:30 p.m. That's available. I will order a PSI or a pre-sentence investigation. Mr. Howard, I'll have you talk with your attorney about that. You have the right to participate or not participate in that. You continue to have the right to remain silent. All right, Mr. Howard is remanded into custody. I'll see everyone back May 23rd at 1:30 for sentencing. Thank you. We will be in recess.
Howard was found guilty of domestic battery and second-degree murder. As if the case wasn't brutal enough, the judge was deeply disturbed by the cop's complete lack of remorse over 2 years, as he continued to insist on his innocence throughout the trial.
I struggle with guilt, and I struggle with not knowing. I wish I could have convinced her to stay with me instead of going home that night. The fear on her face and in her voice when she told me about how she woke up with him standing over her will never leave me. Nothing will fill the hole he has created. Nothing can fix or undo what he has done. But her name can be free. The thought that he can no longer have control over her name, her memory, and her spirit gives me a sense of peace.
I'm not that monster, I assure you, that people are portraying me to be.
Despite Howard's claims that he was not involved in the murder, the judge decided against it and announced his sentence. However, before doing that, he had some important words for the dangerous creep.
But what we know, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that you strangled your wife, you murdered her, and then you staged her naked body in the bathtub, shot her through the mouth, and tried to pass this off as a suicide. That's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And, you know, often in horrible crimes like this, everybody wants to know why. And often we don't know why. And I can't get inside your brain, but the pretty clear evidence, I agree with the state, is that this was due to, jealousy, greed, pride, anger, revenge, some combination of that. And because of that, you killed your wife. And you killed her in a brutal manner.
Howard not only committed the murder, but staged it to look like a suicide. It is chilling how someone could be so cruel and completely out of line. Hard to believe this guy was ever a police officer.
You didn't just, when you killed Kendi, you didn't just kill your wife. You killed a mother, you killed a grandmother, you killed a sister, you killed a daughter, you killed a coworker, you killed somebody who brought a lot of life and light to those around her and those she touched. And you snuffed that out because of your own pride, greed, and anger. Despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly at all because we don't like to think that anybody would be like that. The remorse, the lack of remorse, the lack of caring, and just the callous disregard that you had for Kendi and how her death affected those around her. And that you had these same thoughts. You were talking about allowing people to live through your own self-control and restraint, understanding why people would kill their, quote, old ladies and go to prison. And so you're 58 years old. I don't see a lot of rehabilitation, sadly, in your future. Maybe, I mean, perhaps, but that's not a significant mitigating factor in sentencing you.
Howard appeared calm throughout the trial and even during the sentencing as he listened to the judge's plea with a straight face, as if he didn't care what was about to happen to him.
The public needs to know that there is a severe punishment for murder of your wife, and there's no sort of mitigation because the marriage is on the rocks or the wife was unfaithful or things like that. There's absolutely no justification here for murdering your wife, and I think it's important that the sentence sends that message as well. But what I know beyond a reasonable doubt is that you asphyxiated your wife, you murdered her, you staged her body to be found as if it were suicide. It's an outrageously egregious murder. And of course, all murder is, but this is particularly heinous in my view, having sat through the trial and seen all the evidence.
As you can see, the judge had no sympathy for the former cop, and his feelings were reflected in the sentence that he had passed down.
The gravity of the offense standing alone is sufficient to justify a fixed life sentence, and that is what I'm going to impose here. I think Kendi's family deserves to have that closure. The crime is so egregious that I don't think you should be released at any point in the future. And I don't impose that lightly. I have thought long and hard about this, considered all the evidence, considered aggravation and mitigation. There's just so little mitigation here. There's just really none. And so I do find that a fixed life sentence is appropriate for the count of murder in the second degree. On the domestic violence charge, I'll impose 10-year sentence and run it concurrent. I didn't even speak about that. I mean, really, I'm not, I don't mean to give that charge short shrift. The jury found that you were violent and abusive to your wife as well.
Howard was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. It is good to know that a psycho like him would be spending the rest of his life behind bars. Well, that brings us to the end of this video today. We witnessed police officers getting taken down in court and reminded that they are not above the law. Courtroom served to bring justice, and it was satisfying to see these corrupt and arrogant cops finally held accountable. Now, if you agree with me, please consider showing your support by liking this video, and also make sure to subscribe to stay informed about future cases like these. Also, if you enjoyed this video, check out the next video right here.